They threw him out of that restaurant like a criminal. He was the one hunting them. And they had no idea. Atlanta, Georgia. The Sterling Grill sat on the corner of Peachtree and Auburn, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, a wine list that cost more than most people's rent. The kind of place where old money came to see and be seen. Marcus Ellison had been coming here every Thursday night for 6 weeks. Not because he could afford it. Because Richard Holt could. Richard Holt, white, 54, third-generation real estate money, sat at table 9 every Thursday at 7 p.m. with the same 3 men. They ordered the same wine. They laughed the same laughs. And every single week, somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, an envelope changed hands under the table. Marcus had been watching, documenting, building a case that went all the way up to a federal prosecutor's office in Washington, D.C. 6 weeks of careful, patient, invisible work. Until tonight. Officer Brett Callahan had walked into the Sterling Grill at 7:20 because he ate here every Thursday on a police discount that the owner, a friend of his father's, had been extending to him for years. He knew this restaurant. He knew its tables, its staff, its regulars. He did not know Marcus Ellison. What he saw was a black man sitting alone at a corner table. No date. No business meeting. Just a black man in a jacket that was nice but not nice enough, nursing a glass of water and watching the room with eyes that moved too carefully. That was enough for Brett Callahan. He walked over without hesitation. "You waiting for someone?" His voice was already hard before Marcus had looked up. "Just having dinner," Marcus said evenly. "Uh-huh." Brett looked at the empty table. No food ordered. No drink except water. "How long you been sitting here?" "About 20 minutes. 20 minutes and you haven't ordered anything." Brett's hand moved to his belt. "You're making the other guests uncomfortable. I'm going to need you to leave." Marcus looked at him steadily. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I didn't say you did. I said you're making people uncomfortable. Now I'm asking you nicely, leave the restaurant." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He could feel the room watching. He could feel Richard Holt at table 9 glancing over. He could feel 6 weeks of careful work teetering on the edge of a very bad decision. He stood up slowly. "All right," he said. "I'll go." Brett wasn't satisfied with that. Maybe it was the calmness. Maybe it was the way Marcus stood, straight, unbothered, without a single flicker of the fear Brett was used to seeing. Whatever it was, something in Brett needed to push further. He grabbed Marcus by the collar of his jacket. "Let me walk you out," he said loudly. "Make sure you actually leave." The restaurant went completely silent. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. A woman near the window put down her fork. A waiter froze mid-step. Richard Holt at table 9 watched with a small, satisfied smile. Brett pushed Marcus through the front door and out onto the sidewalk. "Don't come back," he said. "Next time I'll make it official." Marcus straightened his jacket. Looked at Brett one long, quiet moment. "Okay," he said. He walked away. Brett went back inside, straightened his uniform, nodded at the host, and returned to his usual table feeling very good about himself. But what Brett Callahan didn't know was that Marcus Ellison had been wearing a wire. And every single word of that conversation had just been transmitted to a surveillance van parked half a block away. Inside the van, Special Agent Renee Carter pulled off her headphones and looked at her partner. "He just blew 6 weeks of work," she said. Her partner, Agent Daniels, 28, 2 years out of Quantico, shook his head slowly. "Who is that cop?" "Brett Callahan, 3rd District." Renee was already typing. "Father's on the city council. Been on the force 11 years. Is he connected to Holt?" Renee pulled up the file. Scrolled. Stopped. "His father and Richard Holt went to the same private school," she said quietly. "They've been photographed together at 3 separate charity events in the last 2 years." Daniels looked at her. "You think Callahan knew who Marcus was?" "I think," Renee said carefully, "that we need to find out." Marcus was 2 blocks away when his phone buzzed. "Renee, you okay?" she asked. "Fine." Holt saw the whole thing. He looked pleased. Marcus stopped walking. "How pleased?" "Pleased enough that he ordered champagne after you left." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Callahan's connected to him. We think so. We are pulling the thread now. A pause. Marcus. We need to talk about tonight. The deputy director is going to want a full report. I know. This could set us back weeks. Or, Marcus said slowly, it could be exactly what we needed. Renee was quiet. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Richard Holt just celebrated too early. And Brett Callahan just made himself part of this investigation. Be honest, if that had been you, would you have shown that badge the moment he grabbed you? Tell me in the comments. The next morning, Marcus walked into the FBI field office on Peachtree Street at 7 a.m. The deputy director, a white woman named Susan Hale, 22 years in the bureau, no tolerance for complications, was already waiting. Tell me what happened, she said. Marcus told her. All of it. The collar grab. The sidewalk. Callahan's connection to Holt's social circle. The champagne. Susan listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You didn't identify yourself, she said. No. Why not? Because Holt was watching. If I'd shown my badge in that restaurant, he would have known we were running surveillance on that location. We'd have lost him. Susan looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. Get me everything we have on Brett Callahan, she said to whoever answered. Financial records, personal associations, communications with Richard Holt or anyone in Holt's circle. Everything. Today. She hung up and looked at Marcus. You made the right call, she said. Now let's find out how deep this goes. And just when Brett Callahan was finishing his morning coffee, completely unaware that his name was now in a federal file, his captain called him into the office. Captain Angela Morrison had been running the 3rd District for 9 years. She was methodical, careful, and deeply protective of her department's reputation. She had not built what she'd built by ignoring federal phone calls. The FBI had called at 8:15 a.m. Brett sat across from her, now looking like a man who had no idea why he was there. Last night, Angela said. The Sterling Grill. Walk me through it. Brett shrugged. Suspicious individual. Wasn't ordering anything. Making guests uncomfortable. I asked him to leave. You grabbed him by the collar. I escorted him out. Brett. Angela folded her hands on the desk. The man you escorted out was Special Agent Marcus Ellison, FBI. He's been running an undercover operation out of that restaurant for 6 weeks, targeting a federal organized crime suspect. The color left Brett Callahan's face so fast it was almost audible. You blew his cover, Angela continued. You forced a federal agent out of his surveillance position in front of the primary target of a 2-year federal investigation. Brett opened his mouth. Don't, Angela said. I'm not finished. The FBI has also flagged a potential conflict of interest, Angela said. Your father's association with Richard Holt, the suspect in the federal investigation, is now a matter of federal record, which means Internal Affairs will be opening a review of your conduct last night to determine whether it was a coincidence or something else entirely. The silence in that office was total. Brett's jaw worked, but nothing came out. You were suspended pending investigation, effective immediately, Angela said. Badge and gun on the desk. But here's the part that changed the entire case, because while Brett was sitting in that office turning grey, Marcus Ellison was already back at the Sterling Grill. He walked in at 9 a.m. FBI jacket. Badge on his hip. 2 agents behind him and Renee at his side. The host froze at the podium. The morning staff froze behind the bar. Marcus walked past all of them directly to table 9, the same table where Richard Holt sat every Thursday night. He placed a folder on the table. Inside the folder were photographs, financial records, transcripts of 6 weeks of surveillance, records of every envelope that had changed hands at that table, bank statements showing where the money had gone, and at the very bottom, a single page connecting Richard Holt's operation to 3 separate city officials, 2 of whom had been photographed shaking hands with Brett Callahan's father at a fundraiser 8 months ago. The restaurant manager appeared at Marcus's elbow. Sir, can I help you? Marcus looked at him calmly. You can help by keeping your staff clear of table 9 for the next 20 minutes. We are going to need the space. And just when Richard Holt thought last night had been a victory, his phone rang. It was his lawyer. And the lawyer's voice was shaking. Richard Holt had been untouchable for 30 years. He had money, connections, a network of favors that stretched from City Hall to the state capitol. He had survived 3 separate investigations, 2 civil suits, and 1 very aggressive newspaper reporter who had mysteriously lost interest in the story 6 months after starting it. He was not prepared for what his lawyer told him. "They have everything, Richard." His lawyer's voice was barely above a whisper. "The accounts, the transfers, the meetings. They have audio from inside the restaurant going back 6 weeks. Every conversation, every transaction." Richard looked up from the phone. Marcus was standing 10 feet away, looking at him. Calm, patient, the same expression he'd had last night when Brett had grabbed his collar. "There's something else," the lawyer said. "What?" "The agent you had removed from the restaurant last night, Ellison. He's the lead agent on the case. He's also the one who testified before the federal grand jury last month." A pause. "Richard, they already have an indictment. They've had it for 3 weeks. Last night they were just waiting for one more piece of evidence." "What piece?" "They needed to confirm the connection between Brett Callahan and your operation. They needed proof that Callahan's actions were coordinated, not coincidental." Another pause. "When Callahan walked into that restaurant last night and removed Agent Ellison, he gave them exactly what they needed. His own phone records show 3 calls to your number in the 2 hours before he arrived." Richard Holt set his phone down very slowly on the white tablecloth. Marcus pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "Good morning, Mr. Holt," he said quietly. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Richard Holt was arrested at Table 9 of the Sterling Grill at 9:47 a.m. His 3 associates were picked up simultaneously, 1 at his office in Buckhead, 1 at his home in Sandy Springs, 1 at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport attempting to board a flight to Zurich with 2 carry-on bags and no checked luggage. Brett Callahan was formally charged with obstruction of a federal investigation and conspiracy to interfere with a federal agent. The connection between his actions and Richard Holt's operation, 3 phone calls, 38 minutes of coordination, was entered into the federal record the same afternoon. His father resigned from the city council by end of day. Captain Angela Morrison issued a statement on behalf of the 3rd District. It was 4 sentences long and contained the words accountability, integrity, and zero tolerance in that order. Marcus sat in the FBI field office at 6 p.m. and wrote his final surveillance report. Renee brought him coffee, real coffee, not the water he'd been nursing at Table 9 for 6 weeks, and set it on the desk without a word. "How does it feel?" she asked. Marcus looked at the coffee, then at the report, then out the window at the Atlanta skyline going gold in the evening light. "Like 2 years of work," he said. "Worth it?" He picked up the coffee. "Ask Holt." Renee laughed, a real laugh, the kind that only comes at the end of something long and hard and finally finished. The indictment was unsealed the next morning. Richard Holt faced 32 counts of organized crime, money laundering, and bribery of public officials. Brett Callahan faced 7 counts of federal obstruction. 3 city officials whose names had appeared in Marcus's surveillance reports quietly announced they would not be seeking re-election. And the Sterling Grill, Table 9, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, was sealed as a federal crime scene for 60 days. Marcus stood outside the Sterling Grill the morning after the arrest and looked at the city he had spent 2 years protecting from the inside out. Nobody had known who he was. Not the host who had watched Brett drag him toward the door. Not the diners who had gone back to their meals. Not Richard Holt, who had ordered champagne to celebrate his removal. They had seen a black man being escorted out of a restaurant and assumed the story was over. The story was just beginning. There is something that this country still struggles to understand about black excellence, that it does not announce itself to make others comfortable. It does not shrink to fit the expectations of a room. It does not reach for its badge every time someone with less power tries to remind it of its place. Marcus Ellison had stood in that doorway, collar grabbed, eyes calm, and made a calculation that most people never have to make, the calculation between personal dignity and the mission that was bigger than that moment. He had chosen the mission. And the mission had won. To every black man who has ever been underestimated in a room that was not built for him, who has been moved aside, spoken over, escorted out, know this. Your patience is not weakness. Your silence is not surrender. And the people who dismiss you have no idea what you are actually carrying. Stay the course. Trust the process. Let the work speak. Because eventually, always, inevitably, it does. If this story hit different, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And drop in the comments, would you have shown that badge, or played it exactly like Marcus did?